Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education monthly meeting is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, to serve, and to lead. The interpreters for tonight are Martha Romo Iguirres and Marty Ramirez. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. The first item on our agenda is a moment of silence. I'd love for us to consider in this moment of silence. Unfortunately, our country is dealing with yet another mass shooting in Charlottesville, Virginia, and those students and community is impacted as well as us, right? All of us are dealing with this tragedy. So I'd love in this moment of silence if we could take time to honor that community. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is celebrations. Mr. Setter.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Mbenga. We have a great night tonight, and I'd like to start things off with the recognition of the Durham Public Schools Principal of the Year. I'd like to invite Dr. William Logan in and Dr. Pascal Mbenga to come down to the podium. Dr. Logan. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. William T. Logan, transformational leader of the historic Hillside High School, has been in this position before. In 2014, he was Durham Public Schools Principal of the Year, and he was chosen once again to be Durham Public Schools Principal of the Year in 2022. He is wearing a brand new jacket. Our human resources team has decided that we need to class up the joint a little bit. At the Masters, you get the green jacket. In Durham, you get the blue jacket. Dr. Logan is an educator with 25 years in the field. He's served Hillside as its instructional leader for a decade and an administrator for 19 years. Hillside is an amazing school. When you see all of the, at the end of the year, the scholarship offers that our students have received year after year after year, Hillside is way up there at the top of the list. Hillside has an on-campus bank. It is an international baccalaureate and advanced placement school, an avid school of distinction recognition under its belt. So many great things happening at Hillside, at a school that happens to be celebrating its centennial this year. And you may have seen a lot of coverage in the last week about the centennial timeline that Dr. Logan spearheaded at the school. We are proud that he is our Principal of the Year. We're proud that in front of his peer principals, he got to put on a jacket, not really knowing what was going on. Every future Principal of the Year now knows what's up. But we are honored to recognize him here today, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Mbenga, who has a further presentation for Dr. Logan.
All right, Dr. Logan, we are really proud of you. The work that you do at Hillside High School. I cannot imagine being in that school for 12 years. You've done amazingly well. You are respected by your peers, central office, as well the entire community. The Hillside community love Dr. Logan. So with that, as the Principal of the Year, we have a token that we're going to present to you, a gift of $2,000. I'm gonna pass the mic to you to say a few words, then I want you to come around and shake hands to our board members here.
Wow. Great evening. This is certainly an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve Durham Public Schools in this capacity. However it was done, the nominations, that process, I just want to thank those individuals for nominating me, especially coming out of COVID. A lot of times when we go through the nomination process, we're thinking about the things that has happened up until that point. And so with it being such a tough year or tough few years for all of us, I just thought it was profound that, my colleagues would tap me for this particular opportunity. And so I'm very, very, very appreciative of the principals here in Durham Public Schools. I can't think of a finer group to work alongside. So selfless, so willing to share their expertise, their talents, their know-how with all of us amongst ourselves. It's just amazing what we can do when we collaborate, the things that we do when we are able to collaborate. I also want to thank the Board of Education for giving me the opportunity to serve, and not just serve this year, but to serve Durham since 2004. And while many of you were probably on the board at that time, I'm just really grateful that I have been able to find such favor amongst board members, amongst superintendents. And the same thing holds true with Dr. Mubenga being here this evening. He is unwavering in his expectations. They're high, they're ambitious, they're motivating, and they're the things that we need, to drive our work. And I will say, I'm so appreciative of his support, as well as the support from his administrative team here at DPS. Everybody's just been really, really tremendously supportive. And that's the only reason why I'm standing here. Because without that kind of support, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm able to do for our students, faculty, and staff at Hillside High School. And so to all of you, I just want to say thank you so much. And I'm going to do my utmost best to try and work my way through this process to show all of the amazing things that are happening here in Durham Public Schools. So again, thanks to all of you.
Logan, take a step to your right here first. There we go.
Our next recognition of the night is the Durham Public Schools Student of the Month. And for the month of November, that student comes from what was once called New Tech High School and is now Durham School of Technology. I'm excited to present to you Assistant Principal Lamont Dixon, who will introduce you to the Durham Public Schools Student of the Month.
Good evening. It is certainly a pleasure to be here to introduce this young man who is a fine individual. We've had Charles at Durham School of Technology, formerly New Tech High School, for 4 full years. And he has definitely lived up to the billing. Again, it's truly an honor to stand before you today to present Durham School of Technology's Student of the Month, Charles King. Charles is a young man who, in my opinion, has an extremely bright future. He is exceptionally kind, intelligent, and polite. He currently has a 4.2 weighted and a 3.9 unweighted grade point average. Charles has been an exemplary student at our school since his freshman year. I came to understand his brilliance when subbing in his English 4 class until the new hire had cleared the employment process. I immediately recognized in his writing and class discussions how intuitive he was. I remember thinking, wow, this is an exceptional young man. They don't come that often, packaged like Charles. In an effort to understand more about Charles, I wanted to sit down and have a brief discussion with him. His interests are economics, reading, watching biographies on historical figures, and video games. Charles also loves CNN. One of his greatest influences is his grandfather, who taught him how to conduct himself and how to be a good person. Charles is on track to earn a diploma in software development upon graduation in 2023. In closing, Charles's message to all students of Durham School of Technology: don't forsake opportunities. You never know when and if they may come again. Being in the right place and doing the right things is vitally important to your success. Board members and guests, I present to you a very kind young man and gentleman, Mr. Charles King.
I'd like to thank the board. Thank you for nominating me. Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for that wonderful speech. And I'd like to thank all the teachers who taught me from K to K all the way to 12. Sorry about that. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am right now. Thank you all.
Before you walk the red carpet, we have a few things for you. First of all, I'd like to present you with the Durham Public Schools Spark symbol. Symbolizes a lot of things, but the Spark pin specifically salutes people for leadership qualities and service to our schools and to our school system. I hope that you will, upon occasion, wear this Spark pin with pride as a mark of our respect for you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I have a certificate of recognition for you that we're happy to present to you. We also have another certificate that comes with a gift from the Raven Family Foundation, a $500 scholarship. But wait, there's more. And finally, from our friends at Triangle E-Cycling, we have a laptop computer for you that we hope can go with you to graduation and beyond. Now, if you could Mr. Dick, hold those for you. Mom, if you would join your son down the red carpet, we'd like to express our appreciation. Certificate. Last but not least, I would like to introduce our Executive Director for Human Resources, Michelle Hayes, who is about to present this month's Teacher and Employee of the Month for Durham Public Schools.
All right, good evening, Chairman Umstead, members of the board, Dr. Mobinga, and cabinet members. As always, I am pleased to bring two recognitions to you tonight. Our Teacher of the Month, sponsored by North Carolina Central University's tennis team, the Townside chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, DCL Consulting LLC, and the Vales Cares Foundation, as well as our Employee of the Month, sponsored by the Office of Human Resources. Both recognitions will be brought to you monthly, and we congratulate these high performers. I know our November Teacher of the Month is Sarah Wilson, a fourth grade teacher at Hope Valley Elementary School. Students thrive in Ms. Wilson's fourth grade class, both academically and emotionally. Students feel warmly supported by her with her enduring patience. They are able to meet academic goals due to her encouragement and her consistently knowing each student's exit ticket, assessment data, and following up with a small group or individual support. All students in her class grow and succeed regardless of their subgroup. And Ms. Wilson's students EOG performs consistently, places her in the upper echelon of North Carolina teachers. Her classroom environment is rich with anchor charts and growth mindset, and it reflects her genuine care for student learning. Ms. Wilson consistently communicates with families and they love having their child in her class. Once again, congratulations, Ms. Wilson, November Durham Public Schools Teacher of the Month.
Good evening, board and everyone. On Tuesday, I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Miss Wilson in her class, my assistant coaches and I, to surprise her for this wonderful achievement and recognition. And I can tell you that it was refreshing to see just the enthusiasm and excitement from the students in her class. It was clear that they really, really love her, appreciate her, and that was really nice to see. This evening, so we presented Miss Wilson with flowers, a cake, and a little bubblies for after hours to relax. And and so this evening, on behalf of DCL Consulting, we'd like to present Miss Wilson with a check for $100 for her achievements.
At this time, you can go ahead and walk the red carpet. Thank you. I'm back. Our November Employee of the Month goes to Andrew Blake Halsey, our Safety and Security Emergency Management Coordinator. Blake Halsey goes above and beyond assisting and supporting our Durham Public Schools community in the area of emergency management. DPS is one of the few in the state to have an emergency management coordinator to assist K through 12. He is a huge asset, not only to our department, but to the district, and is so deserving of this award and recognition. Blake has committed and dedicated himself in ensuring that DPS community is equipped to prevent, prepare, respond, and recover in the face of emergencies and disasters. Our safety and security team is responsible for their own daily tasks and responsibilities, but can often be found supporting and assisting each other to ensure that we meet our goal of serving the Durham Public Schools community to the best of our ability. It is difficult to put into words how dedicated and valuable he is to Durham Public Schools and specifically to our team. Congratulations to Mr. Halsey, Durham Public Schools November Employee of the Month. You may walk the red carpet. Okay.
Thank you, Executive Director Hayes, and that concludes our celebrations for the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Suttereth, and congratulations to all our celebration award winners. I will say it's wonderful to watch the eyes light up as our students and families hear about the scholarship opportunity as well as the computer. And it's really a testament to all the really great things happening in our district. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent's update. Dr. Mubinga.
Madam Chair, board members, good evening. The first thing I want to do is issue a public word of thanks to Ms. Mackenzie Scott, the national philanthropist who notice our work here in Durham Public Schools. Our commitment to academic excellence, social and emotional support, and equity for all students. We were surprised when representative for Ms. Scott contacted us to let us know that she was going to make a donation in support of our students in our schools. And this week, we received confirmation of one-time $18 million grant. This is unexpected good news, and we must be careful and strategic about how we can best prioritize this funding. So I ask our community patience as we work with this board to deploy this grant in a way that follows Durham's values and align with our strategic plan. I'm going to say this, I'm going to go off script a little bit here. We've received several emails. Folks super excited about this $18 million. I am super excited. I was a part of this conversation about 2 months ago. I thought it was a scam. And we had to put all the measures in place to make sure that we're not going to hurt our district. Thank you to our attorneys and everybody that's been involved in the process. But I'll say this kind of funds comes once in a lifetime. Let's be patient. I know some folks want to know the plan. In a week or two, we're going to make sure we're going to involve all our stakeholders in this conversation. I'm going to start with our board. I'm going to work with our cabinet. We're going to work with our superintendent student advisory group. we're gonna work with our representative from our principals and our teachers as well. We really wanna make sure these funds is going to have a long and lasting impact. We have 32,000 students. We really wanna make sure it's gonna impact all these students. Let's be patient. It may take 2 months. It may take 6 months. This was not the funds that was appropriate for this year. Let's be patient to get it right. I really wanted to go off my notes a little bit to elaborate on that. Speaking of our strategic plan, I'm excited about our continuing work to chart our course for the next 5 years through developing the 2023-2028 strategic plan. We continue to seek input from our families, students, and broader community about what priorities and concerns are, so that our steering committee may make recommendation to our boards that, again, follows Durham's values and ignites the limitless potential of every student. Links to our strategic plan survey are available on our district website and on the social media. Please take 5 minutes to share your ideas. We really need your input, only 5 minutes. Board, finally, I want to invite all of Durham families to attend the DPS Showcase of Schools this Saturday, November 19th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Durham Convention Center downtown. This is more than just a magnet fair. The Showcase of School provides families with the opportunity to explore what makes DPS the best choice for children to learn and grow. Attendees will have the chance to talk with teachers, principals, and other DPS staff about neighborhood schools, application schools, and other special programs. Plus, all attendees will receive a free book from Book Harvest. We look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Mavinga. Exciting things happening in Durham Public Schools. And I really encourage families to make sure you come out to the Showcase of Schools on Saturday. The next item on our agenda is agenda review and approval.
Madam Chair, I would like to add an item for discussion after the consent items, a new item 9, a discussion of our draft LGBTQ+ and gender support policy.
Second.
Been moved in second. Any other discussions? I'll take a motion. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, we already had that. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. So we have amended our agenda. The next item on our agenda is Board of Education monthly meeting minutes, October 20th, 2022.
I move approval of the minutes from October 20th, 2022.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is general public comment. I will read our rules before we get started. Please state your name. If speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Second, speakers are asked to present their comments in 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, safety of students, or to the operation of the school system. Finally, the Board of Education will listen carefully and consider the comments, but we do not engage in a discussion with speakers. Our first speaker is Ron Baron.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Ron Baron. I live at 208 North Driver Street, and I'm the proud father of a non-binary kindergartner whom you got to meet few weeks ago. I was glad to see that Parkwood is doing a training to help teachers support our LGBTQ and gender nonconforming students. But such trainings should not be organized by nonprofits. They should be organized by the district, and they should be required for all teachers and staff. We need uniform, enforceable policy and training as a matter of urgency to provide safety and support for our LGBTQ and gender nonconforming community at DPS. I look forward to hearing about the new policy this evening, and I hope it is implemented in short order. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment speaker is Ann Hemstreet. The Cowie Hemstreet.
Good evening, board members. I considered staying home tonight and not coming and sharing with you this evening, but I'm glad I'm here because I am glad to hear that I will get to listen to what's on board with the possible policy. My name is Ann Sakawi Hemstreet. My pronouns are she or they. I am the founder and director of Rainbow Collective for Change. I'm a white queer mother of 2 young children, one of whom uses they them pronouns, and live here in Durham with my wife Allison. Since March, I, along with many others, have been advocating for a board policy that provides clear direction for supporting LGBTQ and gender diverse students and staff. A board policy that will protect LGBTQ and gender diverse students now, tomorrow, and beyond this administration and board. I recognize that a board policy is only the beginning, but a policy is essential for setting a strong foundation. From there, DPS can form a task force that hopefully represents the wide diversity of people who identify as LGBTQ and gender diverse, including Black and Brown folks, neurodiverse folks, Spanish-speaking folks, parents, educators, and students. This task force will be essential for creating a comprehensive approach to implementing and enforcing this board policy throughout the district. An approach that includes quality, intersectional, and ongoing training for all DPS educators, staff, and administrators. An approach that engages families in discussions about self and family identity, diversity, and solidarity. An approach that includes support for including LGBTQ and gender inclusive books and lessons in the classroom from K through 12. This week is Transgender Awareness Week, or in some circles, Transgender Resilience Week. Sunday is Transgender Day of Remembrance in honor of the many transgender folks who are killed every year simply for being who they are. So far in 2022, at least 32 transgender people, mostly Black transgender women, have been killed because of who they are. Imagine how different their lives might have been if they grew up in a society, in a family, went to a school that believed in them and affirmed them for being who they are. You have the power to get a foundation in place so that our community's children might have that childhood. My kid might have that childhood and in a different future. They might grow up to live a long, happy life and be surrounded by people who value them for who they are. Please consider doing the personal work and the work across the district to make this a safe and affirming place for all children. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That concludes our public comment. The next item on our agenda is our consent items. We have several items that have been sent to the Board of Education in advance and have been reviewed ahead of tonight's meeting. Board?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Rogers, seconded by Ms. Byer. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is a draft of LGBTQ policy that was added by Ms. Byer. Do you want to start on that?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I come with enthusiasm for the work and the conversations that we've had and the heart that this board unanimously shares for working on this issue that is so, so important. I left our last conversation thinking that we have a lot of aspirations and we have a lot of work to do. And I think we're unanimous in that. But I also feel very strongly that policy is what is needed. We have guidelines that are strong, but I aspire for this board to codify that in policy. It's not going to be perfect policy, but it's going to be a starting place. And so to that end, I worked with Ms. Valladares and Ms. Rogers to draft a policy that I sent you all on the 3rd of November. And so if you'll indulge me, I'd just like to read that into consideration and tell you that I based it kind of from our gender support guidelines, from model policies by GLSEN, from language that's already kind of codified in our race equity policy. So it didn't just come from nowhere. And it had feedback from colleagues. And I'd just love to appreciate y'all considering it this evening as a starting place. I don't know, because I don't know if I shared it with IT. Yeah, if I'm reading the version from November 3rd. I can forward that to Nicole. Nicole, are you the one projecting? No, I didn't think so. So I don't know about the tech, but I do want to just, at least this is rather than me running on about my thoughts, I just thought I'd just read it into conversation for. I just emailed it to you.
There's been so if we can have this forwarded to Ms. Smith, she'll make sure that we can get it up. I also think we like to try to create our agendas in advance so that we can have those materials included. So if you can read it as well, Ms. Byer, and then send the version that you are reading to the board, so we all make sure.
Yeah, I just did. Yeah, thank you.
That is great. So we all can make sure that we're on the same page. It might take a while for Ms. Smith. She's not running the IT, so it might take a while for that to get on, but if you can go ahead and start reading.
Thank you. The Durham Board of Education respects the dignity and worth of all students and staff and is committed to safe, welcoming, and supportive school environments for all. Students, staff, and families deserve curricular materials and lessons that include the rich diversity of our community. School administrators must seek inclusive training for staff that encourages LGBTQI+ and gender inclusivity. Students and staff must be free to be their authentic selves without fear of bullying, harassment, or intimidation. Students and families may work with school staff to submit a gender support plan to their school. The school's administrators, educators, and staff shall take all reasonable efforts to comply with the gender support plan or with the plan. Student and staff rights are protected by federal and state laws, as well as board policies and guidelines. Title IX is a federal education law that protects students from discrimination based on sex, including sexual orientation or transgender status. Existing board policy provides clear protections for LGBTQI+ students and staff, including transgender and gender non-binary students and staff. Every Durham Public Schools employee should follow these board policies and the DPS gender support guidelines, consistent with all applicable U.S. constitutional rights, civil rights, federal and state privacy laws, rules, and regulations. This policy provides a starting place for our school district and must be expanded quickly to incorporate best practices that will ultimately make schools safer, more affirming, and more inclusive for transgender and non-binary students, particularly those who are Black, Brown, Latinx, Indigenous, and/or people with disabilities who have the same rights to education as their peers. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education will convene a task force of local stakeholders to recommend additional policy language for the board's consideration. This task force will consider recommendations from GLSEN, the National Center for Transgender Equality, Safe Schools NC, Equality NC, the Tyler Clementi Foundation, model policies from exemplar school districts, and other sources. This policy is a living document and is designed to be reviewed and updated on a regular basis. So I hope that that is language that this board can support in some form, maybe on first reading tonight, maybe on second reading in a few weeks. And consider adopting this or something similar to actually just put a flag in the ground, a marker to say, yes, we have gender support guidelines on in our website. Yes, we expect everyone to follow them, and we look forward to working with our community to move this to best practices as quickly as possible. So I appreciate y'all's consideration and thoughts this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Byer, for starting the conversation. I would love to have, I sent this over to our attorney, Mr. Malone, just to get his thoughts. We want to always make sure our policies have been reviewed by staff and the attorney. So I want to see if you had any comments on that, Mr. Malone.
So I did have a chance to review it. I guess I certainly understand the concept and what you are attempting to do from a policy perspective. I'm not sure that I would call this a policy. I think that, I mean, the guidelines that you have are probably closer to policy. I mean, this is like aspirational, maybe a statement from the board. But I don't know that I would necessarily include it in the policy manual. I think that we could, you know, if you like your guidelines, we could certainly, you know, take those guidelines and maybe make that more like a policy. Although in its current form, I do think that you should know that it is effectively a policy in your current guidelines. They're just not housed in the policy manual, but we could certainly take your current guidelines, update those a little and bring that back to you, and you could make that a policy. I think that that's set up more as a policy than this. I mean, this is a great statement. This would be like a great resolution for the board to adopt, more in the form of a resolution stating that these are your goals, these are your plans, this is what you're interested in doing. I don't necessarily think that this is, as it reads currently, is really a quote unquote policy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Malone. I also want to remind us Dr. Mabinga, I think, talked about this in his statements, and in our previous meeting, we talked about putting together a task force to really dig into our guidelines as well as the policy. I think that's been our practice when we did our student code of conduct. There was a group and a task force that was put together. We convened people from all across our community. When we did the racial and educational equity policy, we also did a similar process where we convened folks from all across the community to get together, do some research and revisions, and write and develop our policy. And so I think we had earlier, our board had agreed, and we've already started thinking about names and individuals who could serve on that task force to be working on and strengthening our guidelines or our policy, whichever way we would need to go. We also have committed to doing training. And so we have been looking for and thinking about who the right trainers might be for that task force as well as for the board. I feel like I'm missing one more commitment that we made but those things are happening. So I want people to hear also in the community that we are moving forward, starting that process and wanting to be able to present something really soon so that we can start moving forward. I see your hand, Ms. Valladares.
Thank you, our chair, Bettina Umstead, and colleagues, and also, our administrators. I know that this has been, it's not new. We have emails going back some time, and I want to thank especially Ms. Tanya Giovanni, soon to be Dr. Tanya Giovanni. Thank you for the work that you've done. I know that you sent us, and Dr. Mubenga as well, with Dr. Mubenga's, approval, you sent us Buncombe County's and Orange County's policy that we were able to review and we were able to look at in October 12th. And my only thing about this first reading is that while we want, and the intention was to develop our own Durham policy, we are very aware that this is about civil rights. This is about every student being able to look at the policy book and see themselves reflected in that policy book. It is not okay to do a search in our policy manual and to search for some of these important designations, important ways that our students identify and not find anything that speaks to their rights. And so I want to remind us that the federal government is doing that, but there's federal law, there's also state law, there's also local municipalities, and we are a local education agency, and we can write policies. And so I hear the hesitation, and I definitely appreciate, Tharrington Smith for letting us know. Mr. Malone, you let us know about, just recommendations based on how we wrote our own in-house one. But my recommendation tonight is that we start somewhere. And the start is, let's take the policy from Buncombe. Am I pronouncing it right? It's my second language. So, okay, Buncombe County and Orange County, we have had time to review that. We've got that, in emails going back, from our community advocates who sent it to us, and we actually have looked at it. We've had time to review it. We've had time to, go through the language in it. And that has passed in more than one county. And there should be no reason why 2017 and 2020, these are the years. Orange County passed it in 2020, but Buncombe passed it in 2017. It's 2022. It's time. It's 2022 and it's time. Durham, it's time. Durham, it's time for us to catch up. And I think that, 2017 and 2020, these other counties have done it. Let's just take that solid policy that's already in these counties and let's change the name if we have to, but we have to start somewhere. Put Durham Public Schools, and let's do, instead of BCS, DPS, and make sure that we have whatever relevant things that need to be formatted. That is a start. And I'm so grateful for the work that has happened. I know that we have a wonderful chief of staff who has worked with board members here. We've all had just a lot of appreciation for the task force and the names. That's going to take some time, but we're not going to wait a year. We're not going to wait 2 years. The important thing is that when we look at our policy manual, it needs to be comprehensive. Our policy manual, we shouldn't have to look for a guideline. Our families are not going to quote a guideline. They're going to quote the policy. And so it needs to be in a policy book where we can say policy number 4022, because I don't think we have a 4022. So 4022, policy 4022 says, and then we ensure that everyone is represented in our policy book. We know that this is about civil rights, but we also know this is about serving our families. They are taxpayers. They are the reason why we are here. We want to make sure all our students understand that this work of education means access and equity for all. And there are ways that even highlighting all the different pieces, whether it talks about discrimination, whether it talks about bullying, whether it talks about the way our students identify, whether it talks about the diversity, all of it is speaking about our diverse constituents and our families that come from many different backgrounds, national origin, language, sexual orientation, gender. There's so much that we can learn. And I know that this district's going to be learning about civil rights and about the ways that we ensure that everyone has access, that every family feels welcome in Durham Public Schools, that this is a school system that works for everyone. And as I'm speaking about this, I just want our community to understand that we know that there's a lot of questions. We know that there's a need for training. We know there's a need for more robust conversations around this. We are willing to support, and that is part of the conversation about bringing in trainers, vetted trainers who can come and work with our admins. And Dr. Mubenga, you have committed, to training. You have committed to ensuring that we have all the resources that we need to support all our families. And so all these pieces are moving along, but the policy cannot wait. The policy can be revised. We can start somewhere. And being that we heard about our in-house policy having to wait a little bit, let's start with a policy that is already vetted, that has already been put forth in other counties. And Durham, let's not fall behind on this. And thank you all so much.
All right, Madam Chair, can I talk?
Yes, Dr. Mubenga.
Usually I don't get involved when it comes to policy. That's the work of our board. But I just want to give my 2 cents here. I strongly support policy to make sure that everybody's protected, everybody's supported. But if you recall, probably about a couple weeks ago, we sent you Buncombe County policy, right? So pretty much like Ms. Vardera said, you just want to change the name and all that. As superintendent, I'm good. But when I hear your aspiration about things that need to be done, that's why I'm going to tell you, I want everybody to hear my voices here. Well, we got to be cautious. We have 32,000 students. That's why the task force is really important. So you can hear the voices of all these folks. I read the Buncombe County policy. I'm good with that. But when it comes to things that we have to enforce to make sure training is happening across the board, we got to make sure task force where everybody's represented around the table, because that's where the work you guys are going to hold me accountable to enforce. I really want to enforce your policy, but let's hear those voices as well. Policy, very supportive. I said this before, I'm supporting it. But the enforcement of the work, of the training that needs to be done with all our teachers, all our staff, my 2 cents, we gotta be careful. We gotta be careful. Whatever impact, positive, negative is going to be, is not going to be on the superintendent.
Any other discussion? I do, also, can I just ask a clarifying question? You're talking about Buncombe has guidelines as well, right? As,
So can I just so we can be clear, the Orange County materials that you've received are those are the regs that go with the Orange County policy that is very similar to the policy that you have. Everyone has the kind of non-discrimination policy. What Orange did is they created gender support guidelines that are in the regs that are then on their website in the policy. So when you go to the policy manual and you search, it searches both the policies and the regs, and it grabs that there. So you could likewise, either starting with the Orange County version or I haven't seen the Buncombe one, but Eva Dubison in my office did mention to me today that the Orange one and the Buncombe one are very similar. So they probably are very similar. So you could easily take the Orange County version or the Buncombe County version and create your own reg and have that then posted on your website. One of the advantages in a reg compared to a policy, kind of once it's established, is the superintendent can be more nimble with regs in terms of making changes if necessary, because changes to the regs don't necessarily require board approval. So there's some flexibility there. Obviously, you would be notified of any changes. But that would get it in the policy manual, which I hear the importance to you and the others about being that people can find it with ease. And then that would also, if you started with one of these models, you would be starting with one that has at least been reviewed by lawyers that do this work. I know the lawyers for the Buncombe County Schools, and obviously our firm is in Orange. So my preference would be that you start with the Orange one, because I know Eva spent a lot of time looking at this one and is very familiar with it. But whichever one you choose to start with is fine. And it's something that you could easily have at the next board meeting for review if that's the pleasure of the board.
Is the guidelines that we have currently, wasn't that fashioned after the one from Orange County originally?
Your current guidelines were done, I don't know, 5-ish years ago. We did take a look, Eva did take a look at those recently when this issue was brought to me by Ms. Giovanni. And those guidelines could be updated. I mean, we were thinking that this process would lead to some conversation around either updating those guidelines or doing new guidelines as you work through this issue. But those guidelines are good. They could use a little tweaking But certainly if you wanted to kind of abandon those, so to speak, as part of adopting a different model, the orange one is certainly a good starting point. Absolutely. Or bunkum. I mean, I'm not either one. I'm just to be clear.
Want to clarify, just so Durham led with gender support guidelines in, I believe, 2015, and the board attorney at that time, Mr. Ken Sue, worked with Durham administration in 2015 and led. And so they were kind of the beginning. And so a lot of what you're seeing with like Orange and Buncombe could potentially maybe have been based on Durham, what Durham did, but that's just kind of the clarity. So when we updated it, the reason that it didn't just jump to Buncombe is because I already had what the board and Mr. Sue had worked on in 2015 and then again in 2018. And so Dr. Bullock and I were working on that. And again, with Mr. Matt Hickson, that's what we were basing it on. And so, you know, when we're looking at that, that's why we are wanting more input and kind of guidance from the board. And then just to clarify, and because I can never take credit for something that I didn't do. Thank you, Ms. Vardars, for your kind words, but the Buncombe policy was shared with me by Ms. Millicent Rogers, and then I forwarded it on. So thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Ms. Chavez.
We're being overly polite over here. Well, thank you all. Thank you to my colleagues who worked on this. And I think where I land with this is, I guess I want to say a few things. One, I think we should, I think moving this into policy is important. I think I do look forward to the full process we will have with the task force that I think will flesh out some of the areas that I think are maybe unique to Durham. I would say let's move forward with moving the Orange County with some, mix of the Buncombe guidelines or the Buncombe policy. Let's go ahead and take that as a first read and then go ahead, give some feedback. My thoughts about like implementing it. Well, there are a couple like in the policy. This is what I want to maybe have more discussion and feedback with maybe a small group over the next few weeks is one about how parents are included in the processes of supporting LGBTQ students. I am aware that Durham is a special place and I love that about Durham. And we are, we're just unique. We're not Orange County. We're not Buncombe. I do think the models that they have put forth, perhaps based somewhat on ours, as Ms. Giovanni said, I think they're very useful. And I want to be, and I've said this, but like very intentional about the intersectional lens with which we create this. Racial equity and LGBTQ plus inclusiveness are not separate. They cannot be. And so with that, that's one area that I want to look into, how we include notification with parents. There are some things in here that I just had questions about. We do not have the exact same wording around parental inclusion or things separate from parents as are in these guidelines. And I want to be aware, in our county, in our district, which is 80% Black and Brown students of color, there are ways in which Black and Latinx parents especially are not always, and this is a bigger historical issue, made to feel included in our schools. And so that's something that we talk about. So I want to be very intentional about how we, thread these together. So that's one thing. The other thing I'm aware of is the labor that it puts on our staff. And I am very happy that we are at this point. I've been in education a long time. This has been something that I have worked on since I, got into education. fighting for our LGBTQ youth, and it's very important to me. I'm very excited to see this through. And I want to be aware of the process by which we do that. This is a process, and I've mentioned this before, of, whether we want it to be or not, changing hearts and minds in some way, and giving people a chance to say the things that they need to say and ask. I think in Durham, it's a lot of times people don't feel that they can ask certain questions, but we need to give that space so we can move forward and understand, everybody can understand why including queer and trans students in an intentional way is essential to meeting our academic goals and our goals to empower all of our students to reach their limitless potential. So that's going to take time, and I hope, all of us, as we visit schools, talk to other people, we keep this in mind. This is not just what we talk about up here. This is something we should, be mindful of as we engage with our community and with our schools and with our students and our staff. So that's what I would say. I think it won't be a big difference to put the guidelines into policy at this point. I would not and I also want to be intentional about letting the process happen. And we don't have to flesh out every single thing right now, because that task force is going to move forward and do that. And if there are pieces that we're not sure about, I would say leave those out for now, because we're going to work through them and make sure we get to a consensus that feels good to our community. Thanks.
Ms. Rogers.
So thanks everybody for working on this and talking about this and really working through this. And the draft policy you presented, Nellie, thank you. I do want to make sure whatever policy we decide to go with, the Buncombe or the Orange County, that we are keeping the piece about the Durham Public Schools Board of Education will convene a task force, that whole paragraph, because we want everyone to know how important this work is and how important the community is to be involved in this work. I know that boards previously have held task force prior to implementing policy, but we are Durham Public Schools and we believe in restorative practices. So as we implement this policy, we're not implementing this in an effort to be punitive towards any staff member, but to really find out where we are across the district and go from there and grow from there, because there are different people are in different places. And this will give us an opportunity to really gauge where we need to have more intentional training and support for our people, because everybody's our people and we need to make room for that. I also want to acknowledge where we are after this current election and how difficult things could be for us going forward. So it's important that we move quickly in implementing such a policy before, hopefully it won't come a time, but before there's a time when we can't implement such a policy, because this is important to us and it's important to include everybody in our education spaces here in Durham. So it's out of order in some ways to go ahead and move forward with policy. It's not what has been done historically, but we can pivot, we can change, and we can be the Durham Public Schools we need now, even though we haven't traditionally done that. And I hope that we can go ahead and move forward with this policy and really include the task force as part of that.
Mr. Malone, you had something?
So I understand the task force and the decision to want to keep that. I think that you can have the commitment to the task force in your motion to approve the policy, but I wouldn't actually put the task force language in the policy. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think you can make that, part. And again, I think this reads great as a resolution of some sort. It really does kind of state the board's commitment, and it could be a great resolution if you wanted to do that also separately. But we could easily get you a draft policy based on what I hear to be either Orange and or Buncombe for review at the next meeting. And then again, I would not personally put this language in the policy, but it could be part of the motion approving the policy would be to make sure that as quickly as possible, you convene a task force, blah, blah, blah. So we can help script a motion for that too, if that helps.
Let me make sure everyone has a chance to speak before we circle back around. Any other comments? Mr. Sears? Oh, no. Ms. Valladares or Ms. Lewis? I can go to Ms. Valladares and come back. Is that okay? Ms. Valladares?
Thank you so much. Just a follow-up. Our policy book, my goodness, this is not our policy book, but this is representative. Just understand, like, all the policies in here did not require a task force. I just want to make sure we clarify, like, we have policies in here for everything you need. This is comprehensive. I've looked through our policies. We do not have, how many policies in total? I mean, I know, Mr. Giovanni, you've been helping translate these to Spanish. Since I've been on the board, you've been working diligently to translate. And I know there's so many policies and we have not had a task force for every single one. So I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that the task force is a great thing. I do believe it'll help us towards refining, but in reality, it is not a precursor and it is not something that is a requirement in order to pass a policy. The other thing I just wanted to say is that I am very much appreciative that we're going to do that step of taking that language and I can understand that we will reference the task force without going too into it, because I know that the task force itself is being developed. And as we develop it and as we figure out, but one of the things that I do hear from my colleagues, especially Emily Chavez, I do want to give you credit. You have been an educator in Durham Public Schools, and this has been a topic that you have definitely led in so many different ways. And that call to include parents, the parent voice, one of the things is that the task force needs to have directly impacted families. And, you know, we have all kinds of stakeholder representatives in there. Some of us will be on there so much in terms of the task force, including our admins, but the parent voice is going to be very important. The last thing that I'll say is that, you know, I am so grateful that we're at this point, and the guidelines themselves are great because the guidelines will continue to guide maybe that Durham aspect of this policy. Right now, we're taking a cookie cutter, you know, we're taking something that is standard language that has already been passed in other counties, but the work that we're going to do with the engagement with more of the work that is happening in what we're getting from the task force will help refine that, will help us get to where we need to get that Durham piece in there. So I'm very grateful, and I thank our community for engaging us. I think the number of voices, one of the things that I do want to make sure is that on that racial component, we have heard from stakeholders, diverse stakeholders, and I particularly have been super grateful to understand the sacrifice it takes for families to come here on an evening, many of whom work and take time off of work to show up. Students that have shown up. So we had stakeholders like students, families, and representatives from all kinds of races. And I'm also there with the racial equity aspect, the intersectional aspect, most of all, civil rights. We have that foundation, and we need to make sure that the policy includes the rights of all our families. Thank you.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you to the colleagues that came together to draft this policy for us to review and have further conversation from where we began the conversation. It's super helpful to have this, thank you, Ms. Giovanni, for sharing the history and where DPS began the work and how you were able to pull in Orange County, and Ms. Rogers for pulling in Buncombe County. So I just echo so many sentiments. I think I've shared this before when we talked about it last. We have our guidelines in place, we have Title IX in place, we have an equity policy in place, and we continue to hear from the community that an LGBTQ+ policy is what's needed. I really like what you said, Ms. Chavez, changing hearts and minds. I've had the opportunity to sit on several different task forces, and that is what it's for. When you have a policy that there's a range of understanding, there's a range of just accepting and knowing what it means for their families, for their students, for us to have clarity about what it means from the administration, staff, faculty. It's important that we convene this task force, is where I continue to lean in. We're DPS and we do things differently here. We want to hear from our community. We want to hear from the diversity of voices and stakeholders that are involved. Those are our values. So when we have something that we know that there are parents in different places, students in different places, and understanding on what this means, changing hearts and minds is important. And to me, that's the work that a task force does. I hear you, Dr. Mabenga. The board sets policies for governance. The way that it's executed is up to the superintendent and the administration. That's where we need more understanding, more education, more training. And I hear that. And that's why, again, I stand behind the task force being formed. And I thank you, even Mr. Malone, thank you also for sharing that our guidelines are strong in the way they are. I don't think this is any different than what we already said we were going to do, is to have the guidelines strengthened to become policy. It's a matter, which comes first and when. It is my preference that the task force has some work in it and bringing this to us a really clear policy, but at the same time, is strong. If it can be stronger and we can pull it as a regulation under a policy, I can support that, with it knowing that we're still pulling this task force together for what the implementation looks at like for changing hearts and minds, bringing people closer to the middle.
Ms. Byer.
This has been a fantastic discussion, and I appreciate all of you for bringing your heart to it, and you're centering it in our Durham community. Mr. Malone, I've been listening for consensus, and I thought I heard good consensus of proceeding in some way, hopefully at our next meeting with something similar to the Buncombe or Orange. And that language, I think I brought back from a Safe Schools and Seek, conference years ago. So it's predated my heart. I've always loved it. If this board could unanimously support that in a couple of weeks, that I would be thrilled to have that as an important starting place. And I heard just enthusiasm for that. And I appreciate all the other ways that we are bringing community together on this issue. So I don't take your critique of my draft at all as a problem. I've been.
I did not want to critique.
No, please. I would give you a red pencil to tear it up if it would move this issue forward. It's so much in need of in my heart being raised to the policy level so that it is clear where this board stands and where this administration leads from. So thank you so much for your help getting us there in the coming weeks.
And again, it is a really good, strong statement. It was well written. I want to make sure that that's clear.
Well understood, Mr. Malone. It is a great statement that's been written. I think I've thank you all for engaging in this conversation. I think I've heard clear end goals of what we want. And I know that we all value making sure that every student and family here feels valued, feels seen, feels heard. I think that how we get there is where we hear the difference on our board. And it's interesting, we talk about our Durham values, and to me, our Durham value also has including community members into the process. I think we get a richer policy when we include people from all across our community, people who are folks who have close experience, folks who are experts. And I think it allows us to bring people with us as we implement the policy. I think I appreciate the clarification around Orange and Buncombe and Durham. I think I would want us to look at Durham and what is missing before we just move forward with that. I think we need to look at our own guidelines. If they are similar to Orange, where do they need to be strengthened? Like I would personally prefer that versus just adopting someone else's without doing some of that analysis first. Yeah, and I think we need to clarify what our work needs to be. And I think even in having this discussion today, I think we all might have a different idea of what happens moving forward. In my mind, a task force with a policy can help us clarify what the work needs to be in our schools and in our district moving forward. I think it also provides the superintendent and his administration more direction than kind of, I agree, this is beautiful language. It feels, I'm not sure what happens next, right? So having a task force that really fleshes out a clear end goal of working on policy, strengthening our guidelines, and looking at the policy together creates a clear end goal and thinking about what implementation looks like. So that is kind of where I'm sitting in this conversation. Yeah, like we could take the draft policy as it is written as a resolution, since it's not really considered a policy, and we are moving forward with the task force. We know these things are in action. We could also direct our administration to look at our gender guidelines as they currently stand and strengthen that with the language looking at orange versus just adopting another one without kind of going through the process of having community to look at it and respond and that kind of thing. I think those would move us in the right direction. I think it's important to make sure we have an opportunity for people to see and respond and administration to work through what we want to adopt.
I have a question, clarification, and maybe Mr. Malone, would you help us? Can we make a motion to pass a first draft of policy based on Buncombe and Orange, and then put it for a vote? If we can move forward with what I think most of the board members are on the same point, that we don't have to wait for the task force to finish their work, whether they take a year to actually get bare bones policy in our manual. And I heard from many of my colleagues that we are ready to move with a bare bones cookie cutter policy that has been adapted by other counties, that has already been vetted, that we have had time, months to review, so that at the next board meeting, we do a second reading and we can actually pass it, versus conflating all of it with, sorry, I apologize. My hands kind of move a little bit, but versus conflating all that with the work of a task force. It's going to take time. We understand that our policies are not written in stone. We can always revise it. We have processes in place to revise a policy. My question is, what can we do in terms of a vote to see where we're all at, whether we can move forward with a policy? This is a first read, and we know that the policy that we presented needs some work. So we're going with Buncombe and Orange County policy.
I do want to add that this was added to the agenda as a discussion item. So it was not added as a first read or anything like that. I just want to remind us of that. But Mr. Malone, go ahead.
So what I would recommend would be that the board by vote direct the administration and the lawyers to bring a draft policy. If this is where the board is, to bring a draft policy based upon the Orange and/or Buncombe model to the next meeting. I think that at the next meeting, if the board reviews that policy and you find it acceptable, I think the cleaner option would be at that point to waive second reading and to adopt it immediately then. I don't like the idea of the board approving something that you don't actually have in front of you tonight to look at. But I think you could certainly direct the lawyers and the lawyer and the administration to bring that to the next meeting. And then if you like it, waiving second reading would be the better way to proceed. That way it would be on the website. The community can see it. Everybody will see it and know what you're reviewing ahead of time. And then you can waive second reading if you so choose at that meeting, or you can, is it 30 days? Or you could shorten it to 2 weeks and approve it at the following meeting, but you could still, stick with your process. And I think the community can tell by what you're doing tonight and what you're talking about doing over the next couple of meetings that you're committed to this issue.
We can make a motion tonight to approve to direct the administration to bring a draft policy at the next board meeting that we will read, and we will waive the second reading, or we have the option to waive the second reading and pass it then. Okay, I
Yes,
understand.
but you would not Right, but let's wait and see the document, review the document, you discuss it among yourselves as a potential policy for you to adopt. If you then read it and you like it, then you could certainly waive second reading.
My
at that
only thing
point.
is we've read it and we've had it. We're changing DPS. And so we're only changing the name. We're saying that we're going to adopt the structure that other counties have passed. And I think what we've talked about is we're going to let the task force do the work of giving us the Durham richness and the Durham value. But we're talking about policy that has already been vetted. We've had time, months to read it. We've all read it. We've all discussed it. I've had many conversations and we've all had conversations. And so the thing is, it's not that it's a new thing. I mean, we have had this policy in our possession. And it's public also online. Everybody has seen it. So it's nothing, we're not doing anything different other than taking a policy that exists in Orange County and Buncombe County and being able to adapt it so that it actually fits our name, Durham Public Schools or DPS. And so can the motion go on? Because I can pull up the document. I actually sent the document to, with the name change, and I sent it to everybody. So we do have a document.
But Ms. Valdez, I want to be clear. It's important that when we are passing policy, that we have it on an agenda, that we have an opportunity for the public to see it before it gets here, and that it's been sent to us as a way to vet. Like we have had in the past, our policy committee sat down and vetted all of our policy. We had a task force that vetted policy, and that while it has been emailed to us, we have not added it to an agenda for an action item. So I think we need to, the urgency are here and it's really important. I want to note that there's an urgency in this moment. And I also want to make sure that we are moving in the right spirit of the way our board, with a governance board, right? And what our roles and responsibilities are.
Clarification, can we make a motion for to direct the administration to bring a draft policy? There's the question, yes or no, tonight, November 17th?
So
November 17th, 2022. Can we make a motion for the administration to bring a draft policy at the next board meeting?
And
I mean, you certainly could make such a motion, but I also think that the administration and the lawyer understand that you expect this to be on the agenda next month, and you will have a policy for consideration whether you make a motion or not. But
Okay.
if you prefer to make a motion, that's perfectly fine, but I can promise you there will be a policy on the next agenda.
And I think there needs to be clarity. Are we talking about our guidelines? Are we talking about something completely new? I personally don't feel comfortable asking for something completely from scratch in the next 2 weeks, right? We also have a holiday that's in between there. I just want to be clear about the ask. I would like to see our gender guidelines compared with Orange and strengthened and bring that to our next meeting. But I think we just need to be clarifying what we're talking about. And I just want to clear it up because we've been using the language interchangeably.
So we have reviewed the guidelines and your guidelines and would propose changes to them that would get them kind of closer to Orange. So it's just, I mean, either way, you probably would end up closer to Orange anyway. I mean, you have good guidelines. They're not that far off. I mean, this is not apples and oranges. I mean, you've got good guidelines. There are just some things that we would probably tweak to get it closer to the Orange version. So I don't think that you would notice that big a difference, honestly. And then this will be, and then these would be guidelines or regulations that would go in the policy manual is what I understand. Again, it's not technically going to be a policy, it would be regs, but it would be housed now with the policies such that one would find them there.
Thank you for that clarity. That's really clear about what our next steps need to be. And I think as, we will continue to have conversations about the task force so we can solidify that group. I think the goal would be at what's the day, November 7th, that we could also bring that draft list in our December meeting of the task force folks so they can get started. I know there's task force in Durham that work for 18 months and 24 months. We can put a time limit on our task force to ask them to work in 6 months. And I think, in being a part of the Racial and Educational Equity Task Force, we were able to get it done without it being 18, 20 something months. So we can put a time, we can go from there. So I appreciate that help clarify where we need it to go. Do we have any other?
I'd like to make a motion.
We don't need a motion.
I know we don't need it, but I want to call you doctor. I want to call you all doctors, but Mr. Malone, you just told us that tonight, November 17, 2022, we can make a motion to direct our wonderful administrators, our administration to bring, and I know that, hey, this is not about trust. We know how hard you work, but this is more about, there's a community of folks who have come and engaged us for months, for years, educators even on this board who have also done this work. And I don't really see a reason for us to act like we don't know what we're doing, because in reality, this is not rocket science. There are people who are waiting on our leadership to make sure that our policy manual is inclusive of all our families. And so we're saying we're going to go start very basic. We're only going to do Durham Public Schools, DPS on policies that have already been vetted. We have had time to review. And so I wonder if the motion can be general. I could do that. A motion, I move to direct the administration to bring forth a policy at the next board meeting, an LGBTQ gender supports policy for the next board meeting. Based upon the Orange County model.
Second.
The move by Ms. Valladares, seconded by Ms. Byer. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. All right, and with that, I'll take a motion to go into closed session.
I make a motion that we go into closed session for reasons stated on the agenda and pursuant to General Statute 143-318, 2011, A8 to formulate and adopt the school safety components of school improvement plans.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please use the same sign. Passes unanimously. We are now back in open session. Dr. Mabinga.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Let me take this point of privilege here to thank our community for the support for the bond that has passed. Yeah. So we are very grateful. So we're gonna make sure that we're gonna meet the timeline of all the projects, and thank you, community, for the support. With that, board, I'm here to seek your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
Move
Oh.
approval?
Second.
It's been moved to approve the personnel report for November 17th, 2022. It's been moved in second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.